Also, would like to acknowledge the Wongal people and all Indigenous people and their long stewardship, sustainable stewardship of this country, which has never been ceded. We will be talking about renters, but we also will be talking about things that apartment dwellers can do. There's been a lot of increased interest in the condition of rental housing due to a myriad of factors. One is the increased demand for rental accommodation. Renters now make over 30% of the population. If you go back 15, 20 years, it was more like 10 or 15%, and that's increasing. That's a significant proportion. And if I was a politician, a large group that I'd want to make sure were happy. But because of the market constraints and the shortage of accommodation, a lot of rental properties are below standard from an energy efficiency, from a health aspect. And you can see these are just some examples of news stories over the last couple of years of how much this has become a focal point. Renew has done for a long time been advocating that there needs to be better standards in rental properties from an energy efficiency and a health perspective, and that along with other groups, there's a coalition called Healthy Renting, which I'll refer to later, and as a result of that advocacy, Victoria now has improve their rental standards and require insulation. They require heating systems to reach a certain level of efficiency and so forth. New South Wales is under pressure to do the same, and they just finished the week before last a consultation on what form minimum energy efficient standards for rental properties should take. So they are looking into it, and hopefully it may lead to some improvement. So a lot of things I'll be talking about are easy things for people who are renters to do, but they're also easy things for any homeowner and apartment dweller to do. Apartment dwellers, like renters, are often limited by strata in terms of what you can do physically to your apartment to improve it, just like renters are. So you'll see there's quite a bit of overlap. But the things we'll go through is working with your landlord. Similar tactics may work with your strata committee as well. We'll look at energy bills and retailers. That's a simple place where you can actually save money. Then simple things you can do around the home to make it more energy efficient. We'll look at appliances, which obviously use a lot of energy, and what we can do to use them more efficiently. We'll look at a couple of critical rooms, the kitchen and the bathroom, in terms of our energy use in those areas. I'll go into a bit more depth about strata properties and what they can do to reduce energy. We'll cover the examples of advice and assistance and government rebates that are available. And I'll talk again briefly and about, as I've just mentioned, rental standards. I find it difficult to get rid of the annoying tab at the top. Anyway, working with your landlord. Obviously the first thing you need to do is to check your lease as to what you can do. Under the current New South Wales rental standards, the landlord is obliged to provide a property that is fit to live in reasonable repair, and have adequate lighting and ventilation. So quite often, you might be in a rental property and you can't open the windows in your bedroom because it's an old window, it's stuck in place, or it's been painted in place. You have a right, in legislation to go and demand that window be repaired and natural ventilation be provided. But it's challenging for renters because they risk eviction if they make too much noise or complain too much, even though the New South Wales government did bring in last year changes to the legislation to reduce, I can't think of the term, but evictions without a reason. Landlords now have to provide a reason if you're going to be evicted. There were originally some extra parts to that, which were watered down. If you were being asked to leave because they were going to do repairs or sell the property, especially if they're going to do repairs, they had to provide documents that showed that they had quotes from tradespeople to do those repairs. That was in the original draft, but that was removed, I guess from later pressure. But you can try, if you're dealing a lot with a property manager, you might end up getting a blank door a lot of the time. So if you can approach the landlord, you might find landlords are probably reasonable people. And if you're in a place that's uncomfortable, too hot, is mouldy, has extreme condensation, or is too cold in winter, it's good to document what those extreme conditions, if you can take the temperature, or write down examples of discomfort that you've had if your kids haven't been able to sleep, or that you've had to sleep on the floor because it's the only cool place, or if there's no ventilation. And if you go to your property manager and you have that sort of documentation, they've got to do some response, especially if you approach in a respectful manner. It's no point going and whacking your hand on the property manager's desk and saying, I want this done straight away, certainly be polite. There's some links there. The first one tells you what you're allowed to do in terms of making changes under the rental standards. The tenants organisation has a lot of fact sheets about what you can do, about maintenance and how to get that organised, but also about how to negotiate with property managers and landlords. And as I said, there's the Better Renting organisation, which also has quite a few useful fact sheets on their website. This graph just shows, for a typical New South Wales home, the energy breakdown. It can vary depending on the particular property, how big the family is, what appliances you have. But you can see the biggest proportions are water heating, space conditioning, which is heating and cooling, and appliances. Cooking and lighting are smaller. If you have old lights, such as halogen or even incandescent lights, they're going to be using a lot more power, and that's an easy thing to change. The other thing to look at is actually getting to understand your energy bill. You may get it and you pay it and you think, oh, that's a lot, but you don't actually look at it. And it's worth getting to understand it. Understand firstly what tariff you're on. There are usually two types. You get a standard rate, which would be 35 cents, 40 cents a kilowatt hour, and that you pay that all the time. Or you can have what's called time of use tariff, which you normally need a smart meter for, and that breaks the day down into different periods. So the peak period when you pay the highest amount is from 2 p.m. till 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. under Ausgrid. It covers this area. There's the off-peak, which is from 10 p.m. through to 7 a.m., which you pay a lower rate. And then there's the shoulder period, which is the in-between hours. And if you're on a time of use tariff, you can use that to your advantage. Because at the peak time, you might be paying up to 50, 55 cents a kilowatt hour. In the off-peak, you may be paying only 20 cents a kilowatt hour or less. So if you're doing things like your clothes washing at night or very early in the morning, and most clothes washers these days have timers, same with dishwashers, If you have an EV, an electric vehicle, the best time to charge that, if you can't get access to solar, is overnight at the lower rate. So if you manage your energy use, time of use tariff can be better for you. If you don't manage it, you may end up paying more. So first determine whether you are on a time of use tariff. Make sure you're getting any concession you should do, are eligible for. But the other thing is to look at your actual usage, and this is across the year, and how you compare to other households. If you're a small household, you're probably using 10 kilowatt hours a day or less. If you're a standard family, you're probably using around 20 kilowatt hours a day. If you're using more than that, there's some excessive use. You might have an appliance that's inefficient, or you're leaving something on. So if your use is that high, it's worth investigating what may be causing that. You can see the use will vary over the year. These are the 4 quarters. During winter, we tend to use more. The days are shorter, we use lights more, we use heating, we tend to be indoors more. So winter can be, you obviously can pay more, so there's some strategies to try and reduce that. Now, one of the easiest things you can do is find a better electricity plan. Trying to find one that's like trying to find a good mobile plan or a good health insurance plan. You know, they make it really easy. But one thing you can do, there's a government website, energymadeeasy.gov, which is a comparison site. It's not like the one where the silly meerkats are running around, which is a professional, commission-based type of site. And the beauty with this is it's quite sophisticated. You can put in your address, but you can put in your actual meter identifier number. You have to give them approval to take that, and they can access your energy data. And so when they give you a whole range of plans you can compare, they're ones that are being matched to your energy use. So it's quite a smart tool, but there's a lot of other good, useful information on there about saving energy and getting the right plan. So it's worth having a look. A recent report said that over 70% of Australians are paying more for the power than they should be. They're not on the cheapest plan that they can get. The federal government's initiated a few things to alleviate that. Now on your plan you should get a notice from your retailer that you're on the cheapest plan available, or how much you can save if you convert to their cheapest plan. But shop around, and as I've said there, you know, if you can find a cheaper plan, go back to your current retailer. They don't want to lose you, and if you say you're thinking of leaving, I'm sure they can find a better plan for you. But still, there's no problem in changing. You know, a lot of plans offer discounts if you change. This is another site which is a private site, and it does have sort of giveaways inside it, but it has a lot of good information because it looks at more the green credentials. So if you're concerned more about reducing your emissions rather than just saving money, this is a good site to compare different plans to see how they rate from the renewable energy component aspect. And you can, it will give you some estimate of what savings you can make if you're adding solar and battery to your plan. The other thing I've added in here is the Solar Sharer offer, which is a federal government initiative which is starting from the 1st of July, where the federal government's requiring every retailer to have at least one of their basic plans which gives you 3 free hours of power in the middle of the day. And this is because we've got so many solar systems. We've got 4 million solar systems on houses in Australia, that, as well as the large solar farms that are being built, that we're producing too much solar in the middle of the day, to the point where the price on the wholesale energy market has been negative in some instances. And so to solve that problem, they're offering you free power in the middle of the day so that people will start using all that excess solar. There's already some plans that are offering that, but from 1st of July it's mandated that every retailer should provide one.
Excuse me, can I just ask, do you need a modern meter?
You need to have a smart meter, that's one.
So that would be applicable to strata systems?
Well, it may depend on your metering system. If you've got a smart meter, there shouldn't be any reason you shouldn't access it. It might be different if your apartment has an embedded network because you're locked into a certain supplier. But if you engage your own retailer yourself individually and you have a smart meter, it shouldn't be an issue.
How do you know if you've got a smart meter?
If you've got one of the old type round ones that have the bars that move across like a clock, that's an analog.
But if you're in an apartment, how do you know that?
Well, do you have a property person? They should be able to tell you or show you. It's usually a grey box with a digital read on it. You should be able to, I mean, in an apartment it could be a bit difficult. If you're in a house or in a rental property, the Ausgrid should supply them for free. But what can be an issue is the meter box may need to be upgraded, which may prohibit, there may be some cost if that's an issue.
And considering like in this area you've got a lot of new apartments and things,
Yes.
could you say that anything sort of like built in the last 5 years would have a smart meter? Like
Yeah.
is there a time frame, like
Oh,
would
yeah,
it be 10 years or
10 years I'd say.
Can I ask sub-meters, what are they compared to smart meters? Because some offers don't allow you, you're not eligible if you have a sub-meter.
Well, a sub-meter is usually when you're subletting. So if you have a property and you have various tenants, then they all have a sub-meter, which you just use within your, it's not related to the grid.
Right.
Or,
But it's not, if you have living in an apartment block,
Yes.
and you have a smart meter for your unit,
Yes.
that's not a sub-meter.
it shouldn't be, no. If you, I mean, it may be an issue. It's hard to comment on each particular situation because the way they're set up electrically but if you're in a situation where each apartment can go and get their own retailer and you have a smart meter, there shouldn't be any reason you should can't access this. The one thing to keep in mind though with this is you've got to look at the plan that they're offering because they might give you 3 free hours during the day, but they might increase your daily charge or your other rates to compensate from their commercial point of view. So do your due diligence in terms of comparing plans. And it's also really only worthwhile if you're going to manage it and really, like I was saying earlier, run your appliances during that time, charge your EV. If you're not at home, there's probably not much advantage unless you can set up your appliances in a smart way so they run during the day. So just going to cover simple things you can do around the home. That most of these are more about making the house thermally more comfortable, and by doing that you make it more energy efficient because you don't have to use as much heating and cooling. But so we'll go through. Draft proofing is pretty straightforward and easy to do. Can be a bit limiting for renters, but if you're smart about it, you can do it with things that can be removed. Shading and window coverings can make a big difference because of the heat loss through glass. Fridges, especially old inefficient fridges, if you have a second fridge in the back room or a bar fridge as well as the main fridge, it's much more efficient to get a newer bigger fridge. The fridges have come, like most of the heat pump, they're all heat pump technology, hot water heaters, air conditioners and fridges. The technology has advanced so much in the last 15 years that it really makes sense to, if you've got one that's more than 10 or 15 years old, to consider replacing it, and there can be incentives to do that. Heating systems, the recommendation in the long term is to go to electric, and we can go into that in a bit more detail. Putting in an efficient shower head saves money straight away, and I'll explain that in a bit more detail. And insulation can make your place more comfortable. Can be a challenge to do for renters, and depending on apartments, not so critical in apartments unless you're right on the top floor. Usually you'll have other apartments around you, and your exposure to the external atmosphere is quite limited. It's usually only through one or two facades. But if you're renting an older house and there's no insulation, it can really improve the comfort. So looking at heat loss, just to know that you can lose a lot, mainly up through the ceiling, out through walls and windows, and if you're in it, if you've got an old timber floor, elevated timber floor, you can lose a lot of heat down through the floor and through other gaps. And as mentioned, if you reduce that heat loss, you make it more comfortable and you're using less energy for heating. And it works reverse in summer, so it's heat gain coming in is the problem. And so what can we do to reduce that? If you've got a dark roof, that really does absorb a lot of heat, especially if there's no insulation. If there's good insulation in there, it can really minimise that impact. But again, the more we can seal or we can shade, we can reduce our energy use and be more comfortable. So this diagram just shows that it's not only through walls and windows, but it's through vents, up chimneys, under skirtings, around pipe penetrations. You might find your range hood goes into a cupboard and out through a wall, and when they put it in, they've just got a big hole which probably has a gap around it. There are instances like that which you can seal up with spray foam quite easily, and it can have a significant impact. If you seal and draft-proof a house up properly, you can have a 10 to 15% improvement in the thermal comfort. One proviso is you don't want to seal it up too well, because you can then get mold and condensation. You need a certain level of ventilation, or be able to open it and close it to at least let some fresh air in. So if you're a renter, you may need to seek landlord approval before doing draft proofing. But as mentioned, there's often gaps under skirtings. In older houses, you'll get ceiling vents and wall vents. These were originally put in mainly for fireplaces, for gas heating, gas lighting, so that you get some fresh air coming in. If you don't have gas heating anymore and you don't use your fireplace, you can seal these up on the inside. You can see there's an outside vent there. Don't seal the outside vent because that's in a cavity brick wall. You need that outer skin of brickwork to breathe, but you can certainly seal the inside. Some people just put some sheet of polystyrene over it. You can just get a bit of spac filler and plaster it up, but you'll notice an improvement. Floorboards. Another classic place is in bathrooms where you might have a ceiling exhaust fan, but it never closes. So when you've got a nice warm bathroom, all the steam and heat's going up there, which is not good from a mold and condensation point of view, because especially if there's insulation in the ceiling, all that moisture's going up into the ceiling space. So if you're in a rental and you have mould on your ceiling, what's the most likely cause is that your ceiling fan is just dumping all that moist air into the ceiling. So one you can do is ask that that ceiling fan be ducted through the roof to the outside, which is now what the requirement is if you were building a new house. Right. And once you do that, you can get a dampener to sit in the fan or the duct so that the cold air is not going out when you're not using it. The damper will open up when the fan gets turned on. But just that reminder there that if you have unflowed gas heater or fireplaces, you should maintain the vents. Our recommendation is to get rid of unflowed gas heaters. They're very unhealthy, give off nitrous oxide, carbon monoxide and other particulates. So it's much better health-wise and also cost-wise in the long term to use electrical heaters. I won't go through these in detail. You'll get these when you get the slides, but they're just links to different suppliers of draft proofing material. But you can see seals like this can be removed. That's a V seal, and they can just fit into gaps, and they sort of spring open to fill the gap. This is a draft stopper, which is what I said could sit on top of your exhaust fan, and it'll open and close. These ones go around doors. There's a whole range of them. Again, you probably, before fitting these to a door, you probably need to get approval from your landlord. But again, if you're in an apartment and you own the apartment, go to town. If you've got old doors and windows.
But I think maybe sometimes you have to be aware of fire.
Well, fire doors, that's internal doors into the hallway. These are only for external doors that are going outside. You don't really, you shouldn't mess with the fire door. Yeah. Good point. Looking at windows, especially in a winter situation, if you're in a newer apartment, you probably have reasonable quality windows. If they're double glazed, that's the ultimate. But having good curtains and blinds can be as equivalent to double glazing in performance, especially heavy drapes with a pelmet, because that creates an air seal between the drape and the glass. Honeycomb blinds are also quite effective, and they can be translucent or semi-translucent, so you're still getting light through, but they're creating a good air seal, and they've become quite affordable now. There's quite a lot of suppliers, and you can get them, you pull them down. You can even get them for sliding doors, and you can pull them across. They're a good, simple way to, if you're getting cold in winter and you're losing, you've got a large area of glass like this and you're losing a lot of heat, that's probably the best solution. So you've got to operate them. So every night, I've fitted honeycomb blinds through most of our house, and every evening, and some of them are quite high. I've got a pole, and go around, pull them down, but it makes a big difference. So the other option is to try and do something about the glass. If your windows are old, the glass is probably only 4 mil, 3 or 4 mil thick. Newer glasses tend to be laminate glasses or double glazing, which are a lot better thermally. But you can get films, especially clear low E films, which you can put onto glass, which certainly reduces the heat coming in summer, but also does slightly reduce the heat loss in winter. They're good in an apartment situation because I did a study with a large apartment in Kingsford about 18 months ago, and they wanted to do something about their windows, but not everyone wanted to do it. But putting on a clear film meant people could choose to do it, and the look didn't change. So it was quite easy to get the strata approval for those who wanted to do it, could have the film. If you can afford to do it, refurbish with double glazing. That can be quite expensive if you've got large windows. There's what's called secondary glazing, and that's fitting another layer of glass. It's usually a polycarbonate in a metal frame with magnetite, comes with magnets, so it fits onto your aluminium frame. They can be removed in summer if you want to, but it's a more affordable way of doing double glazing. But all of those will probably need strata or landlord approval to do, obviously. One which renters can do, and a lot of people in Canberra are doing this to reduce the cold, is putting bubble wrap on the window. And it's quite easy to do. You can just moisten it and push it on there and it'll stay there, or you can tape around the edges. And you can take it down again in summer. But it's like a cheap form of double glazing. The other thing double glazing does is reduces the condensation. If you've got thin windows and it gets cold in winter, and are people getting condensation on the windows this time of year? Oh, okay. You've got good windows then, or you've got curtains or whatever in place. But that can be a problem, certainly in some rental. So it's a good way to solve that issue. As I mentioned, curtains are good, especially with a pelmet. If you're on a limited budget, if you're renting, you can get a lot of thick curtains from op shops and garage sales, places like that. Even putting a pelmet across the top with cardboard or plywood stops that airflow, because what happens is you get a convection current occurring, that the air will rise or drop as it cools, and you'll get a draft. You can often see that when you see curtains moving, and it's that draft. But if you block it off at the top and your curtains go all the way to the floor, you can stop that draft. The other alternative is to fit the blind or the curtain into the depth of the window. A narrow blind fitted in there, cut to a good shape, gives you a better seal, especially with the honeycomb blinds. External shading is important. It can be a bit hard to do if you're in a rental or in an apartment. Landscaping can be easy if you've got approval to grow something outside, especially on side windows, down the side of the house. Tall things like bamboo, even if they're in pots. If you've got a large window that gets really hot on certain days, a beach umbrella can be a simple way of shading them. Or adding shade cloth. Wren shade here is a product which is like a perforated foil, which you can see a bit through. Can be good if you've got a window that's really hot. You can put that on during the summer or the peak days, and then take it off other times of the year. So they're just examples of different shading options. This guy's putting up a temporary screen. If you use that QR code, that takes you to a Renew article about blinds and curtains and shade materials. Curtains, I was talking about heat loss with curtains and blinds, but it also minimises your heat gain in summer. Ideally, external shading, such as blinds and sailcloths, pergolas, these external blinds, stop the heat hitting the glass. Once the radiant light and heat goes through the glass, you get the greenhouse effect, where it changes from long wave radiation to short wave radiation, and it gets trapped in there because it's much harder for the shortwave radiation to get back out through the glass. So external shading is much more effective at keeping heat out, but if you can't do that, certainly internal blinds contribute, and at least confines that heat going to a confined area rather than getting through the room. As I mentioned, insulated ceilings in the roof space is the best way. If there's none in the house, that really will have a big impact on making the house thermally more efficient. Not really an issue in apartments unless you're on the top floor. Most larger apartments would have a concrete slab on the top floor, and these days they would be insulated if it's a fairly new apartment. But if you're in an older house or a townhouse, it can have a big impact. There's some guidance there about safety, and you can do it yourself, but we recommend you don't. It's better to use licensed contractors because of the making sure it's done properly and the safety issues that can be involved. One thing to be aware of, that landlords can claim immediate tax concession on repair of existing insulation, so if it needs to be upgraded, and it will shrink, it will settle over time. Most of your bat type insulation works. What works is the air pockets, it's not the fibres. So it's the air between the fibres that actually stops the heat flow. So once it settles, you're reducing those air pockets. So if it's been there 15, 20 years, it's probably half the depth that it should be. But if you're going to get it out, be aware that you'll have dust and contaminants in there, especially if it's an old house from the 70s or earlier, because you may have lead dust in there from the paint or from when we had lead petrol. So there are companies that will come around and vacuum it out, and it's really recommended from a health perspective. But they also, if they put in new insulation, the landlords can claim depreciation. And most landlords, especially if they're negative gearing, love their tax concessions. So it's worth pointing it out to them. Looking at appliances, hot water is what it says behind the tab. As I mentioned, having an efficient shower head, it will reduce most hot water's used when we shower, and you can halve your hot water use through having it efficient, going from 9 or 10 litres a minute down to 4 to 6 litres a minute. If you've got an older style storage hot water system, you can put these called valve cozy. It's just a polystyrene box to go over the relief valve, because there's heat loss through that valve. And that's something that's easy to do. You can check the thermostat setting on your hot water system. If it's gas, you should be able to see that, and you can adjust that yourself. If it's like at 70 degrees, it's much hotter than it needs to be. It can't come under 60 degrees because it needs to be at that temperature to minimise the risk of Legionnaire's disease. But if it's at 70 degrees, you're making it a lot hotter than it needs to be, and then it has to be, you have to add more water, or it has to go through a thermostatic valve to bring the heat down again. So it's better to set it at the lowest minimum setting. If it's an electric system, you really need a plumber to change that. And it's worth, if you have a plumber come to site to do some other repair or maintenance, it's worth asking them to just check what the thermostat setting is on the hot water system. If you have exposed pipework outside, you can just apply insulation to that. You can just get that at any hardware. Polyethylene's the best. I don't think any landlord would have a problem with you doing that if it's accessible. One thing with hot water systems is that usually they fail, and when they fail, we're in a panic we ring the property manager and they have to replace it, and they usually just replace like with like because it's cheap and easy. But it's much better to try and get it replaced with a more efficient system. And if you're aware that your hot water system in your rental property is not very good, is on its last legs, especially if it's leaking, the tank's about to rust out. So it's worth, even when you go to check a rental, if you're going into a rental, have a look at the tank of the hot water system and the hot water system in general to see what state it's in. And if it's in poor quality, it's worthwhile making the landlord or the property manager aware of that and letting them know the better options. And we can go to that in more detail. There's now incentives to help you or to help them replace them with more efficient systems. So I mentioned about water saving and shower heads. If you like having long showers or you have teenage children that like long showers, consider putting in a shower timer in the shower. This one's really worthwhile and doesn't get promoted enough. It's run by Sydney Water. It's WaterFix Residential. You can ring them up. I think for a pensioner it's $16. I'm not sure, it's probably twice that or something if you're working. They'll come out and replace your shower head with an efficient shower head. They'll check for any tap leaks and repair the leaks. They'll put aerators on your taps, and you can get it done to rental properties. You just need the approval of the landlord. They shouldn't have an issue with doing that. It's obviously Sydney Water doing it, it's not just Joe Blow, the plumber down the street. But I can't recommend that highly enough. Looking at heating, the various types, reverse cycle heat pump. It's the cheapest form of heating to run. Your split system air conditioner is the cheapest or most affordable system to run, and it has low emissions, so it's better for the environment. Gas heating like this is moderately expensive to run, but as I mentioned, it gives off unhealthy emissions, especially if it's unflued. If it's flued, it's not so bad. Ducted, no one probably has underfloor ducted heating, gas heating. It's not that common in Sydney, but it has a high running cost. Then you've got your more portable electrical heaters, which is what most renters, I guess, are probably faced with using. They can have a medium to high use, but maybe your only option. So just some tips to get the most out of your heating system. If you do have a heating system with a thermostat, try and turn it down to 1 or 2 degrees and put on a jumper or something. The rule of thumb is for every 1 degree you increase or decrease the thermostat, you'll save about 10% of the energy. So if you can adapt, that can be a good strategy. As mentioned, reverse cycle air conditioning is more efficient. It's more efficient at heating than cooling. And most people have the reverse cycle there for cooling in summer and may not use it in winter, but it's actually the most efficient way of heating your home. Zone off rooms, only heat the areas that you're using or you use the most, and turn off your heater when you go to bed, or fit them with timers so they're not just running all night. As I mentioned, you can dress up. Personal electric throw blankets are quite effective if you're in a really cold house. They can be quite affordable. You've got to be careful about how you store them, and even normal electric blankets, they should be rolled. rather than folded. If you have underfloor heating or even reverse cycle air conditioning, it's worth cleaning or dusting the vents, especially prior to the heating season and prior to the cooling season. And you've got in your rights to ask them to be serviced. As a culture, we're very poor at getting our air conditioners serviced, but they should be serviced every 2 years, and that can make sure that they're running efficiently. You can, if you do have, you can get these vent directors for split system air conditioners as well as in-floor heating, which can direct the heat to where you want it. This graph just shows the difference in efficiency between a gas ducted heater and a reverse cycle aircon. So the gas ducted heater is about 80% efficient. So what that means is for every unit of gas that goes in there, you're only getting 0.8 of a unit of heat out. But with the reverse cycle with heat pumps, which also applies to heat pump air conditioners and also the heat pump in your fridge, for every unit of energy that goes in there, you're getting 4 to 5 times unit of heat or coolth out of that machine. So that's where they come down, that's where you save money in the long term. There's bigger issues around the fact that gas is getting more expensive and will likely to become more expensive. It's always going to be a fossil fuel. The electricity grid is becoming greener all the time, and the prediction is it will start to get cheaper as it gets greener. And so it's not only efficiency, the electricity will be a cheaper option in the long term. This is what you can do for cooling. So again, as I said, if you can adjust the thermostat up 1 or 2 degrees, then the machine doesn't have to work as hard. If you've got fans fitted, they can be really helpful in reducing the humidity, especially in late summer in Sydney. If you're in an apartment, if you don't have them and you have enough ceiling height, they're really worth considering installing. And they work well with air conditioning. They actually enhance the effectiveness of the air conditioning because they circulate the cool air around. And you can now get DC fans, direct current fans, which are a lot more efficient. They use probably a quarter of the power that the older AC fans used, and they're much quieter. You pay a bit more for them, but they're much better in the long term. Again, zoning off rooms helps, and fitting timers. Ventilation can be a good strategy for cooling in what's called night purging. This really works when you're getting cooler temperatures overnight than during the day, and you can open up all your windows and doors and let the cooler air through. It takes the heat out of the mass of the building, and then in the morning you close it down, draw your curtains and blinds, and it'll hold that coolth in the walls. You may not have that option. A lot of apartments don't have a lot of great cross ventilation, but if you can, it's worth doing. Not as effective in late summer here, around February, January, when we have those really humid days, and the overnight temperature might only get down to 20 degrees. It's still a bit cooler, but it's much better if the outside temperature gets down to 15 degrees, 18 to 15 degrees. It has a much bigger impact. As I mentioned, you're quite within your right to ask a landlord to fix any windows that don't open. Some people don't want to open windows in a rental because there's no fly screens and they'll get hammered by mozzies or whatever. You can get your own fly screens which are fitted with magnetic tabs or Velcro, which you can take with you. So that's worth considering. And I mentioned about cleaning vents. Lighting is an area where you can save a lot of energy. Lighting has become a lot more efficient with the introduction of LED lighting, which is now fairly universal. But still, it makes sense to turn off lights when they're not in use, when you leave a room. Avoid using lights during the day if you open curtains and blinds and let more natural light in. Replacing older or less efficient lamps such as compact fluorescent, halogen or incandescent lamps with LEDs makes sense because they're more efficient, they burn cooler, so you're letting less heat escape through the lamps up into the roof space. If you do use LEDs as downlights, it's recommended that you use sealed or IC4 rated lamps because they are better sealed and there's less risk of fire or damage because of the heat against insulation or wiring in the roof. This slide shows the different energy uses of the different types of lamps, going from standard incandescent through to halogen, compact fluorescent and LED, and you will see that LEDs, for a similar sort of brightness, which is measured in lumens, there is much less energy used for an LED. So a 60 watt incandescent lamp, the equivalent LED will only use 10 watts. So if you're not sure what wattage to get, you can use this table to make sure you get an equivalent brightness to the globe you already have. Portable appliances can use a fair bit of power if they're left plugged in all the time. It's worth turning them off at the power point. Or if you have a lot in the one area, say as on an entertainment unit, if you have them plugged into a power board, you only have one switch to turn it off. You're probably all familiar with the energy label, energy efficiency star rating label. It's worth going for a higher rating when buying new appliances. It's also worth noting the number that appears in the little red box there, energy consumption per kilowatt hour per year, gives you an estimate of how much energy that appliance will use through the year, and if you know what you're paying per kilowatt hour, you can get an idea of how much it will cost to run that appliance. You can have situations where you might have two appliances which have the same star rating, but one could be a bigger fridge, the other could be a smaller fridge, and they'll use different amounts of energy through the year. So you can use that to help guide you as to what might be the most efficient option. Remembering to turn off computers when not in use can be beneficial. LED TVs are more efficient if you're looking at buying a new TV, but overall standby power can add up, and it can be up to 5 to 10% of your power bill. So it's worthwhile trying to manage it. When buying new electronic appliances, look for ones that are rated with the Energy Star label, because this means they're rated with low standby power if you have to leave them on. The kitchen is another area where we use a lot of energy because of all the appliances that are in the kitchen. The fridge is often the biggest culprit. It's good not to overload the fridge because it's making it work harder. It's also good not to have it too empty. If you're buying regularly and not keeping a lot of food in the fridge, it can be worthwhile adding water bottles or drink bottles recycled that you fill with water. They help to store the coolth in the mass of the water and help stabilise the temperature. If you have an old fridge, say a second fridge for keeping beer or a second bar fridge, they're generally fairly inefficient, especially if the fridge is older than 15 or 20 years. So it makes sense in the longer term to upgrade and get a newer fridge. Fridges have become so much more efficient in the last 15, 20 years. If you're stuck with your old fridge, it's worth looking at the seal. One tip to check whether the seal is any good is to get a $5 note and stick that in the door, close the door, and if you can pull the note out from the seal quite easily, then the seal is not generating enough friction. There are people who'll come round, you can order them, they'll come and replace your fridge seal in situ. Fridges are always trying to give up heat to stay cool. So it's good to provide free air around them, usually at least 5 centimetres if you can find that space. It's also good to avoid having them next to a window or a western wall or an oven where there's excess heat. Try and put them into a cool part of the room. That may be difficult when you're renting. You may not have much choice, but they will run more efficiently if they're in a cooler space. If you have an older gas cooktop, they're very unhealthy to use. They give off a lot of particulate pollution, which is not good if you have respiratory problems or children with asthma. A good simple option is a portable induction cooktop. The one pictured in the top right hand corner there is sold at Aldi for about $50. It's probably only a 2-burner, but it can be a good alternative to having to run your gas cooktop. Bathrooms also use a fair bit of energy, mainly because of the hot water. We've talked about how you can make savings with replacing the shower head and getting your taps looked at by Sydney Water. If you like long showers or you have teenagers who love long showers, consider fitting a shower timer, which gives them a reminder of how long they've been in there. We've already discussed how mold can occur in bathrooms and about ceiling exhaust fans can be a benefit. Looking at apartments and strata buildings, a lot of energy in bigger apartment buildings is used or consumed in the common areas. And the big users are if you have a centralised air conditioning that's servicing each apartment, or if you have bathroom and kitchen ventilation, exhaust fans, or car park ventilation. In older buildings, this could be running 24/7 with fans running at top speed. Old inefficient lighting, which is on all the time, such as in car parks or stairwells, common areas, can use a lot of energy. Older style lifts can be inefficient. Bigger buildings can use a lot of energy pumping water around the building, and the pumps may be out of date. There may be other miscellaneous motors in plant rooms which may be due for an upgrade. So in order to turn this around and reduce the energy use and make savings, some of the simplest things you can do is look at your tariff and power plan. Similar to what we discussed before, it's worth shopping around, see if you can get a better deal. Replacing older fluorescent and incandescent lights or halogen downlights with LEDs and fitting them with sensors, especially in car park areas or common areas. They don't need to be on all the time. Carbon monoxide sensors in car parks can reduce the amount of times the fans in the ventilation are running. They'll only come on when
CO is above minimum level. Installing VSDs, variable speed fans, on pumps and exhaust ventilation can pay for themselves very quickly. This means that the fan runs at the speed of the energy that's needed at the time, not just constantly on full bore. Power factor correction applies to the setup of the energy system in the building. You will need an electrician or specialist to look at this, but if it can be reset, you may find some energy savings. For all of this, we recommend you get professional advice. There's assessors, such as neighbours assessors, who can come and do a tour of the building and give you recommendations as to what will be the most effective measures to undertake. Solar for apartment buildings, there is a lot of interest in this in the area at the moment, but there are challenges. The amount of roof area that's available can be limiting, especially in taller buildings. The orientation can impact the size of the system you can install, whether you're overshadowed by neighbours or other buildings. The other challenge is getting agreement within the body corporate to proceed with the works, but it has been found that when it's been done, the payback can be within 2 to 10 years. Can be enhanced if fitted with batteries, but this is only viable if you've got the time of use tariff and you can charge the batteries during the day and then reuse them at night when the tariffs are higher. There are challenges around locating the batteries from a safety and access point of view. And with apartments, you can look at whether the solar's going to apply just to the common property power usage and meters, or directly to each tenant's meter for them to use, or a combination of the both. There's a company called Illume who have a system called SolShare, which is a smart system that takes the energy from the solar system and reticulates it through the building to those tenants who have agreed to sign up. Not everyone needs to sign up, which means it can be quite flexible for some body corporate arrangements. But it's a very smart system and it's being installed in quite a lot of apartments at the moment. And that is mainly because of the New South Wales SOAR grant scheme, which has just been extended and allows grants of up to $150,000 to all for an apartment building to go towards the cost of the installation of solar. Again, I'd recommend you get some professionals to help you with the application process and to help design the system. But it could be a game changer for a lot of buildings. We did discuss it probably would apply better for lower level apartment buildings, 3 to 5 stories, which have bigger roof area per unit area, rather than tall 20 plus level up buildings. But it may be worth investigating. A lot of renters are keen to have solar on the house they're renting. It can be a challenge, although we are finding that some landlords are agreeable to it being installed because it adds value to the property. When it's installed, it may require some sharing of the costs because obviously the tenant gets most of the financial benefit and the landlord makes the outlay. But there have been some various innovative arrangements in terms of power bill payment to overcome these issues. One option is to invest in a remote solar system. This is mainly if you're wanting not only to reduce your bills but also reduce your ecological footprint by reducing emissions. There's a not-for-profit group, Pingala, who organise these facilities. They did one at the Brewers Young Henry in Young Henrys in Newtown, where a group of investors put money into the system. It was installed. Young Henrys purchased the power from that over a 15-year period. At the end of the 15 years, the solar system will become the property of Young Henrys, but the investors over that period got a return each year on their investment. And that also allowed Pingala to go and investigate other options. They have recently built a large solar farm in the Riverina called the Haystack Solar Garden, and you can still invest in this and you'll get a small return, but the option also to get reduced power bills. Looking at government incentives, starting with the federal government, you're probably aware of their Cheaper Home Batteries program. A lot of people have taken advantage of this, installing batteries in their homes. Over 350,000 have been installed, which are leading to reductions in the electricity demand at peak periods, so it is having an impact. They also have their Household Energy Upgrades Fund, where homeowners and landlords can get low interest loans from nominated lenders to do energy efficiency upgrades of their home. It usually involves an assessment by an energy assessor who will then make recommendations as to what are the most effective things to do. Just today, the great news is that the New South Wales government's announced a similar scheme called the Home Energy Saver Scheme, where homeowners and landlords can get zero interest loans of up to $15,000. And renters and low-income households can get cash discounts up to $4,000 to do energy efficiency upgrades. This can cover everything from solar, batteries, upgrading your air conditioning, installing insulation, putting in ceiling fans, double glazed windows. The renters will need the landlord's approval, but they can apply to get the money and undertake the work. Details are still coming out, and so we yet to see the finer detail. For quite a while, New South Wales government has also had under their energy saving scheme incentives to upgrade your air conditioner or your hot water system. So if you have a whole old hot water system or air conditioner that needs upgrading, even if you're a renter, you can let your landlord and property manager know that they have these incentives, financial rebate to help them upgrade a system. Here's a whole list of useful resources. You will get access to this when the email with the PDF is sent around, but just briefly, Your Home is a federal government website that has a lot of information. The New South Wales Climate and Energy Action website has lots of useful information. Currently, you can get a home energy assessment done subsidised by the New South Wales government, and there's a link there. The My Efficient Electric Home Facebook group has a lot of information and very vibrant discussion. I think it has over 160,000 members at the moment. And there's a list of other links there, such as the Tenants Organisation, which has great fact sheets on repairs and maintenance. Livability is an interesting one. It was set up by LJ Hookers quite a few years ago to try and educate the real estate industry about sustainability. And they have a page there where you can search for specialists in your areas, which are property managers or real estate agents who have done their livability training and so have some understanding about energy efficiency and sustainability. And if you're looking to rent, it might be worthwhile targeting those property managers because they'll be much more receptive to when you're making requests to make energy efficiency upgrades. Renew has quite a lot of resources. If you're trying to get off gas and get rid of your gas appliances, we have a toolkit to guide you through that process. Back in 22, we did a series of webinars around geared towards renters, and that's available on our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel has over 700 videos, so it's a great resource covering all sorts of topics, including apartments and energy efficiency, and lots of resources for renters, as well as just about solar and other energy systems. Just briefly to cover the Healthy Homes for Renters campaign that Renew has been part of. There's been a lot of advocacy done in this area, and as a result, governments are reacting. In August 2023, the Federal National Cabinet announced the Better Deal for Renters initiative, and as a result, various states and territories are now reviewing their rental standards. New South Wales just recently finished a consultation on incorporating energy efficiency in their rental standards. Last week, Tasmania did the same. So it's good to see this reaction, and hopefully things will improve. And just in summary, in terms of Renew, we have our YouTube channel. Our flagship event is Sustainable House Day, and our two magazines, Sanctuary and Renew. And that is all. In terms of questions, we had one question about the new New South Wales Government Home Energy Saver program as to whether that was available for apartment owners. Looking at the documents, there was nothing that excluded apartment owners, but obviously you're probably limited to what you can do to being inside the apartment, such as putting in ceiling fans, replacing appliances. Other external works will probably need body corporate approval. So there is a bit of a challenge there. The other questions revolved around meter boxes and upgrading to smart meters, and how available the solar sharer scheme will be to apartment dwellers. If you have a retail your own individual retail plan and your own meter, and it's a smart meter, there's no reason an apartment dweller couldn't access the solar sharer scheme. If you need to get your meter upgraded, that is usually done by Ausgrid because they own the meter. But to get that to happen, you probably need to apply through your energy retailer first, and they will contact Ausgrid. There was one question about a particular apartment block where there were nearly 50 older meters they wanted upgraded to smart meters. They were unable to get Ausgrid to come and deal with that as one group. It seems they've got to all apply individually, which seems overly complicated. Don't have any answer to that, but we do have contacts at Ausgrid, so we may reach out and see why that is the case. But that is all, so thank you.